Hello.
Okay. Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
You are not Shannon.
No, I am not.
Hi everyone. Welcome to Scary Talk episode, whatever this is. I would like to introduce you to a special guest co-host today. Introduce yourself, please.
Ooh, okay. My name is Sunny. I'm an old friend of Andre's. I'm super excited. I have zero qualifications.
She she qualifies to be in the podcast in the sense that she has a mouth and vocal cords and a brain. So honestly, that's
Can
what I have
confirm,
too.
not sure about the brain.
Okay, hi everyone. Today we're talking being buried alive because we want to we want to get cheery. We're in the middle of a pandemic, so we're really trying to raise our spirits up. So we're talking about being buried alive. But first, Sunny, how are you doing? How's the pandemic treating you? What's up with you?
I've been doing okay. As I mentioned, I live in a basement, so I have zero concept of space and time. My sleep schedule has gone from waking up at 1 p.m. to waking up at 7 p.m. to essentially like
Mm,
resetting, and now I'm on a normal sleep schedule. So, yeah, and
wow.
just working on finals. I'm about to graduate my undergrad, so hype, hype, hype. Yeah, that's
And
pretty much
what are
been.
you studying
Mhm.
again, Sunny?
I'm studying education with a track in human development. So I get to put my paw in all the social sciences, like sociology and psychology and all those very respectable, strong fields.
Wow. So smart. I could never. I mean, that's cool. Very relatable. I understood everything you said. That's awesome. Thank you. Okay, so
How about
being buried
you?
alive. What am I studying? Yeah, let me tell all the let me tell the audience on episode 60 whatever this is what I'm studying. This is the time. Um, uh, I study political science, y'all. So I guess I can relate a little bit to what Sunny's saying. But
Hmm.
honestly, like I mean, in that now that's a
Yeah,
terrifying
and how have
topic.
you
But I'm not
been during
trying to.
quarantine? Oh? Oh?
I'm
Wait,
not.
wait, wait.
No, I was saying like having to study poli sci now. That's a terrifying topic, and I'm not trying to scare the audience away. So I think we should keep it lighter. So let's just talk about being buried alive.
Oh, okay, okay. I think I'm on the same track now. We're keeping it
Yeah, I
light.
think no, they'll faint. So hi all. We have a couple stories for you. I at least have a good number of them. These are kind of funny, very, very sad and terrible, but still kind of funny in the morbid kind of way. I hope you'll like these. So I'm gonna start off, Sunny, and I'll give you space in a minute to do one of your stories, and I think we should just go back and forth and entertain the audience with these with these spooky,
Ooh.
fucking horrible stories.
Okay, hype.
Okay, let's do this. So, being buried alive sucks. I guess I should give a little bit of background. In case y'all don't know what being buried alive is when you are alive and then someone accidentally buries you. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. So, oftentimes you will die while being buried alive, which in a sense, I guess it all kind of comes together, because they thought you were dead and now you actually are dead once they exhume your body. Sometimes you'll survive though. I don't know. There's a very good movie about it with Ryan Reynolds. Everyone should
That's
watch it.
true.
It's
There's
probably
a sort of
called
irony
Buried.
to it when you die by being buried alive.
Yeah, it's almost like, it doesn't really matter. In the end, you get there. You get to that same point where you had to be, which was death, because now you're dead. So, that's what being buried alive is. On to the stories. The first story that I have, well, actually, a little bit more background that I have. I made some notes here. Is the fact that starting around the 18th century, I don't know if you know this, Sunny. I'm about to expand your big brain. Starting around the 18th century, suspected corpses were subjected to abusive tests to establish death. I'm getting this info from an article called Five Terrifying True Stories of People Being Buried Alive from allthat'sinteresting.com. So,
Mm.
starting in the 18th century, basically, medical doctors had a hard time determining, because this is the 1700s, right? I can understand. Had a hard time determining if a corpse was really dead, like for sure, for sure, for sure. And so they would subject the bodies, the potentially still alive bodies, to these abusive tests. Like they would, it could be pretty benign. Like they could pinch your nipple, like that. I think that's pretty benign. But apparently they also would put hot pokers up your ass,
Oh.
just test for a reaction. Which, listen,
Casual.
I guess it makes sense, right? If you don't react to that, there's no way you're still alive. So fair. Um,
Pretty
so
fair.
yeah. I mean, I think the presumption of death is pretty fair if you don't flinch from having a stick up your ass. So,
Yeah, I mean, or
um,
if you don't let out a little daddy or something,
exactly. In 1846, though, French doctor Eugene Bauchu suggested the use of new stethoscope technology to listen for the existence of a heartbeat, which is great. It's what we use today in modern medicine for the most part to determine whether someone's alive. That makes total sense. However, he was actually laughed out of the room when he first suggested this back in the time, which makes sense because for you, the listener, if you've listened to a lot of these episodes, we've talked about pandemics before, and also a couple
Mhm.
other episodes. We've talked about similar kind of scientific findings where people will be like, haha, that's silly, you're stupid, and you will never win, and all your findings are bogus, and you'll never be a respected scientist. I poop on your head. And then they end up being the actual standards of, how we understand science today. Like that happened
So
with,
that's like
what
how
was it?
science is going to view the flat Earth theory in 50 years. Am I right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, we were just talking about, I think, in the pandemics episode that we did a couple weeks ago about cholera, and
Mm.
no, was it cholera? Yeah, it was cholera, and it was a huge pandemic in London a couple centuries ago, and people were like, "Oh my God, it's in the air. Like, if you smell dirty air, you get cholera," and then people were drinking poopy water. So, and when someone said it's the water, people were like, "That's stupid. We have gone with the bad air theory for centuries."
Damn.
So, yeah,
Wow, that's tragic. That's like
I
tragically
know.
stupid.
Yeah,
Wow.
I know. That's AP Euro taught me
It's like
that.
hundreds of minds combined to come up with that too. It's like yeah, that's crazy. Humans really be out here.
I know. But here's the thing. Here's what's terrifying about being buried alive, right? That
Yeah.
um, uh, these things still happened even after the 17th century. Some of them even just
Mm.
last century. Some cases. I don't think any of the ones that I'm gonna read, but some cases do happen in modernity. Like some cases have happened this
Mm.
century.
Mhm.
So there's always accidents. Like a stethoscope isn't always gonna save the day.
Mhm.
Um, regardless. So first story is a story of Angelo Hayes. In 1937, a 19-year-old from France named Angelo Hayes went for a motorcycle ride. Perhaps he had minimal knowledge of how to operate such a vehicle because he ended up crashing it and slamming headfirst into a brick wall. um, Angelo, watch out! Okay, so when help arrived, they basically find this boy, right? And he's all mangled and he has no pulse, and he looks terrible, and his parents are like, I think he might be dead. We're not sure, and the ambulance is asking them like, okay, well, should we declare them dead? And then the parents are like, yes. But then there's an investigation by an insurance company that has the body have to be exhumed 2 days after the funeral.
Mm.
I guess, yeah, right. Something like an insurance investigation that makes sense. Okay, whatever. The body is exhumed, and to the surprise of the investigators, they find that the body was still warm. Apparently, in the aftermath of the accident, Angelo's body had put itself into a deep coma and required very little oxygen to upkeep his system. So even a stethoscope hadn't caught the fact that he was still alive.
Wow.
However, this story has kind of a happy ending. After being buried alive, Angelo did receive proper medical care and actually did make a miraculous full recovery. He then invented a type of security coffin that he toured across France. It was reported to contain, and this is a quote, a small oven, a refrigerator, and a hi-fi cassette player. So,
I just don't
listen, he learned
understand.
from his. He took that trauma and he channeled that into some. Listen, okay, we stand.
Yeah. I mean, that's modern day capitalism, right? You take your trauma and you profit. What else can you do?
I just love that story. Now, do you have do you want to go next? Do you have like a not super long story that you can then go and then I'll follow with you?
I'm down to go next.
Alrighty,
Um,
go ahead.
yeah, so I was just looking on the Wikipedia page through the history, and it
Mm-hmm.
was really fun because basically people have been doing this for a really long time, And it seems like no matter which culture you go to, there's an understanding of like, wow, this is some really fucked up shit to be doing. So we'd better just do this
Mm-hmm.
to like the very worst people, like a sworn priestess who has sex when she said she wouldn't. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and of course that's kind of just the baseline for how you want to do that. So in ancient Rome, the Vestal virgins were priestesses, and they basically had to take a vow of celibacy. And if they were found to have violated that in some way, they would be buried alive. But the interesting part is that you weren't technically allowed to bury people in the city, so they would bring them down to a little suite essentially and be like, hotel alive burial, and leave them some food and stuff, and then just lock them in a suite underground. So it's not even technically an alive burial. I think it's like a sort of just being left on your own. Although there's also kind of an account, but yeah. So I thought that was pretty cool, and there's at least one account of, I want to say, someone who other people believed was innocent. Let's see here. Oh, yeah. So when she was let down into the subterranean chamber and her robe had caught in descending, she turned round and gathered it up. And when the executioner offered her his hand, she shrank from it and turned away with disgust, spurning the foul contact from her person, chaste, pure, and holy. Chaste, pure, and holy? And with all the deportment of modest grace, she scrupulously endeavored to perish with propriety and decorum. So that's Cornelia, who was accused, and who, as she was described, many believed to be innocent, it looks. Yeah. So
Wow.
that was at least one way. Yeah, I mean, you know, if you're gonna be buried
That's
alive, do it with
shitty.
dignity. Yeah.
I didn't realize people used life burial as punishment. That's really not the direction I thought you were gonna go at all. So thank you. I love that. That's very different.
Oh, for
Um,
sure.
huh.
Call me woke.
Well, I mean, I mean, there's definitely worse ways to go than being buried alive. I gander probably burning to death,
Yeah,
but I think
well,
being buried alive is like pretty up there. Honestly, it's
you
pretty
know,
shit.
I was thinking about what makes it so shit because I found a couple of cases that didn't seem as bad in my mind. And for me, I realized it was the combination of two things. It's the suspense of it. Like, there's basically one case I'll talk about, but it's like sudden and he dies, and it's like, oh damn, you know, that kind of takes away the terror of being buried alive. I feel like it's the suspense, and like the not knowing. You don't know when your oxygen's gonna run out, right? Um,
Yeah, that's a pretty shit
yeah.
death.
Um, I think that's like the big thing. And there's a second thing that I just don't remember, but I'm sure will come up when when you know the blood gets flowing in my brain.
So in about 30 more minutes. This episode is so cheery. I love it. Let's continue. I have another story for
Okay.
you. This is the story of Octavia Smith Hatcher. Now, Octavia Smith Hatcher, she lived in the 1890s. She had a boy. Her son, of a couple years of age, he was 2, died in 1891. And losing her son put Octavia in a deep depression, and Octavia was then bedridden for several months. During this time, she also began showing signs of a mysterious illness. Eventually, what happens is Octavia's body enters a coma-like state, and nobody can awake her. And then she's pronounced dead in May. She's pronounced dead in May of 1891, just 4 months after her son Jacob's death. Um, then what happens is, in an unusually hot day of that May, Octavia is buried very quickly after her death because it was very hot and embalming was not yet a common practice, so they had to put the bodies away pretty quick so they wouldn't decompose because of the heat. However, what happens is that a few days later, others in the town began falling into a similar coma-like sleep with shallow breathing patterns, just like Octavia had, only to awaken a few days later. People figure this out, and they discovered that it was actually an illness caused by the bite of the tsetse fly. And then, fearing that she had been buried alive, James, her then husband, panicked and had Octavia exhumed, thinking that she might awaken. She had awakened, but James was a little bit too late because Octavia's coffin was airtight, and he found that the lining had been shredded, and Octavia's fingernails were bloody, and her face was
Ah,
frozen into a contorted shriek of terror. So,
ah.
the moral of the story is don't have kids. No, okay. um, don't get close to the tsetse fly is the moral of the story. No, a traumatized James apparently reburied Octavia and erected a lifelike monument of her that sits in the cemetery she rests in to this day. And then this guy apparently went on to develop a severe phobia of being buried alive because who the fuck wouldn't after that experience?
Yeah.
Um, so
It
that
makes a lot of
sucks.
sense. I mean, that's actually, I mean, that reminds me of the second element, which is the accidental element. The idea that this could happen to you, you know, that like,
Hmm. Hmm.
oh, this was an everyday thing. I think that combined with the suspense is what makes it so terrifying. And that's so visceral with the bloody fingernails. Like,
I
you just,
know.
ugh, you know,
I know.
just,
Again, love the vibe of this episode. No, it's funny because I mean I like reading stuff like this. If I mean if it, I don't know, it's kind of morbid, but it's just I don't know. It like it tickles something inside me. It's like it's I think it's satisfying my morbid curiosity. But
yeah.
I think it just sucks when you have to talk about it like this because I'm obviously trying to be light and airy, and after all, this
Mm-hmm.
is half kind of a comedy podcast, but so you try to make the best of it and you try to laugh. I liked Angelo Hayes' story, the first story for sure. This one,
Mm.
it's just sad.
Mm.
um, Let me give you another short story before you go ahead with one of yours.
Oh, for
So,
sure.
one night in 1987, a 39-year-old Illinois businessman named Stephen Small received a phone call that one of his renovation projects was being broken into. However, this guy didn't realize that by going into that project, he was actually going to be kidnapped. What happens a couple moments later is that his wife, Nancy Smalls, receives a call at 3:30 a.m. informing her that the ransom on her husband is $1 million. The family received 5 calls in total and were willing to comply with demands, only they couldn't understand them because of poor sound quality of the messages. Now,
Dramatic
where Stephen
irony.
was, I
Crazy.
know, during this time, was in a homemade wood box about 3 feet underground. His abductors apparently provided him with a flimsy breathing tube and some water, which suggested that they intended to let him live if they got the payment. Which, like, okay, but something happened that they didn't plan on. The breathing tube failed. They obviously didn't plan on that, and so when police finally used the air patrol to find Small's vehicle, it was delayed. They couldn't pinpoint how long he'd been inside the box, but they did deduct that he'd been in it for several hours. Um, and the guys were caught. The abductors were caught.
Mm-hmm.
They were these two. It was this couple actually, Daniel and Nancy. They were convicted of first-degree murder and aggravated kidnapping, and they were put in prison for a long time. It's just, to me, like it just sucks that I mean I don't want to call it like good intention because these people were kidnappers and they were asking for a ransom on someone's life, but like they had the intention of obviously keeping this person alive by giving them the breathing tube and a little
Mm-hmm.
bit of water. But the fact that it didn't work, that must have made them feel like fuck. But also I don't really want to focus on their feelings. I think I want to focus a little bit more on the poor dead guy and also his wife. It's just kind of
And
like I don't know, if you're a criminal you want to be good at it. I don't know. Like,
my
I
question
feel
is,
like
why bury him alive? Like, there must have been something a little sick and sadistic there. Because if you want to kidnap someone, you can just gag them and tie them up like everyone else
I
does,
know,
like a normal
I
human
know.
being.
It's so risky. It's so risky. Like, they still should have gone to
Yeah.
prison, but like they could have gotten away with just the charge of extortion, not murder.
No,
um,
exactly. But they were super negligent. So, yeah.
ah, God,
Uh,
kidnappers nowadays, they're super bad. They're super negligent. I miss kidnappers from the old days. Back when I was a
well,
kid.
speaking of
No.
kidnappers from the olden days, do I have another kidnapping story from earlier in time in the 70s? Yes, I do. Andre, would you like to hear it?
Oh, let me hear it.
This is the horrific true story of 26 kids who dug themselves out after being buried alive.
Ooh.
pretty wild one. And the craziest thing is that the kidnappers were inspired by a Clint Eastwood movie. So it's a hot summer day, July 15th, 1976, and these school children aged 5 to 14 had been enjoying an excursion to a swimming pool as part of their classes in Chowchilla, California, so Central California. And the kidnappers basically stopped the bus at gunpoint. There were three of them, three armed men, so the bus driver stopped. And then they take all the kids, put them into two white vans, and drive them to a rock quarry, which is so cool. I mean, I've only read about quarries in books, so cool for that to come up, but very sad. And so there's this really sad part that the article lists where some of the terrified youngsters were soiling themselves and throwing up, so the older kids began to sing, belting out songs such as "Love Will Keep Us Together" and "If You're Happy and You Know It." So a moment of hope in the midst of all of this.
Okay.
Yeah, and basically the victims are talking about what happened. They were being held at gunpoint. They felt like animals going to a slaughterhouse. And the kidnappers made each of their hostages give them their name and a piece of clothing so that they could use it for the ransom demands. And inspired by the 1971 Clint Eastwood movie Dirty Harry, in which a killer called Scorpio kidnaps a busload of children for a ransom, they do the same thing. It says they had planned their crime for over 18 months, which is crazy considering, again, how negligent they are. We'll read on. But, so their kidnappers throw dirt over the trailer that they're forced into, along with 2 tractor batteries to keep the hatch shut. They're being buried alive, essentially, the driver and all of the kids. The men had equipped the trailer with battery-powered fans that sucked in fresh air, but the stifling heat was still intense. This is July 15th in Central California. That's crazy. So the children start to cry because the trailer is at an oven-like temperature, and one of them, the oldest, 14-year-old Michael Marshall, announces he's not going to die without putting up a fight. So him and the other schoolboys stack mattresses that are in the trailer on top of each other, climb on top of them, and use wooden slats to try to push away a steel plate on the roof of the van. And wow, the boys pour what little water they had left over their heads to fight heat exhaustion, and kept pushing until the hatch was open before digging away the earth so they could all escape. And then when they escape, the kidnappers are napping, literally napping, and so they sneak away. This is 16 hours after they were originally kidnapped. Again, crazy that this was planned for 18 months, and yet they decide to do it in the middle of summer and fall asleep. And the kidnappers hadn't even actually called in the ransom note yet. So, I'm not sure where that 18 months went. That sounds like 18 months of quarantine equivalent for how much I'm getting done right now. But that's kind of nuts.
Yeah. Dang.
Yeah, and basically all these children are traumatized. Talks about dealing with drug addiction and problems later in life. It's really, really sad.
Yeah, you think? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, those kids were brave, though. I mean, that's wild. And
yeah, and the driver isn't the one who initiated the digging out. It was the oldest kid.
Dude, that's fucked. I don't like that kids are being buried alive. That's not the thesis, period. No. Only let's bury more adults. Let's bury more adults alive.
Fair.
I'm gonna campaign for that.
Fair.
All right. Well, I don't know what to say. That's fucked up. I feel sad for those kids, and I'm glad they got out of it. I mean, really, what can I say?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, listen, okay, I'm gonna give you one that's, well, I mean, pretty shit, but at least it's not kids. This woman's name was Anna Hochwald. Anna Hochwald. So, most of what can be gleaned from this unfortunate case is from a newspaper article dating back to 1884, and the newspaper article reports that a young lady by the name of Anna Hochwald was dressing for her brother's wedding and sat down to rest in the kitchen, and then when someone checked in on her a few minutes later, basically she was still there, but her quote-unquote head leaning against the wall and apparently lifeless. So that's what she was doing. This is what the paper reports, right? So she was doing fine, and then someone goes to check in on the kitchen, and she's basically in this lifeless catatonic state. Some people thought that she had suffered from heart palpitations, and that was the cause of her death. Again, heart palpitations. However, this assumption didn't sit well with some of her friends, some of Anna's friends, who thought that her ears still looked pink as though blood was flowing through them. Well, Anna was buried the next day, and her friends told her parents of that observation they had made earlier about her ears. And of course, this perplexed her parents, so they had her dug back up. Which, like, how did the friends not tell this to the parents, like, before, whatever? They found the worst case scenario. The body of Anna was turned on its side, fingers gnawed almost to the bone, and hair torn out by the handful. She did not have a good time, let me tell you that.
Another sad one. Also, the most 1884 reasoning for digging her up. Her ears were really pink. Like, as her parents, you're like, oh wow, her ears were pink. We've got to dig her up.
I know, but I mean, they were right, so
yeah.
Shoot.
Yeah, again, the fingers gnawed to the bone and hair torn out. Just so visceral. It says she had a generally nervous nature, so this time it wasn't like a torn fingernails from trying to get out. It was just tearing out her hair and doing her own thing. She didn't even try.
True.
She said, fuck this coffin. I'm just gonna...
This is true. Here, I'll give you another one before you go. This is good. I have a bunch of short ones, basically. This one is... I got this other information. The information for this case, I got it from a Mental Floss article. In 1822, there was a 40-year-old German shoemaker that was laid to rest, but there were questions about his death from the beginning. The shoemaker's family basically confirmed his passing, and the guy looked dead, but they said that no one could detect any stench, or, and this is a quote from the article, any stench or rigidity in the cadaver. So the funeral still went on, though, but as the gravedigger was dispersing the last shovels full of dirt onto the grave, he heard a knocking from below. This is just funny. Reversing his process and now removing the earth as quickly as possible, the gravedigger found the shoemaker moving inside his coffin. His arms were drawn upward, he wasn't cold, and when an attending physician opened a vein, blood flowed all over the shroud. Over the course of 3 days, resuscitation attempts were made, but all efforts were fruitless. The shoemaker was declared dead once more and laid to rest for a second time. But then, as they were burying him, they heard him knocking, and they had to unearth him again. No, I'm kidding. Can you imagine?
Wait. So what happened that killed him the second time? Something with bleeding?
No. Like, I'm guessing, the article doesn't explain it very well, but to me it sounds like he had probably like brain damage from oxygen deprivation. Because when they heard the knocks, they still had to like unearth a lot of earth, basically a lot of dirt. And okay, yes, they open the coffin and they find him moving, barely, but he's not like normal. And so they take him to the doctor, and the doctor checks him. When they say like opened a vein, that doesn't mean he like killed him. No, that's not what that means.
Gotcha.
He checks, okay. Yeah, and the guy died though.
Damn, that's so sad. He was so close.
Oh well. I mean, listen, it is sad, but it's just not as sad as the other ones, and it's kind of just like a low-key a little bit funny that the guy, I mean, I don't know, like, maybe he was like pounding the coffin, but the article says that he was just knocking on the top of his coffin, and
no,
to
that's
me that's
so
just
true.
so
He's
like polite.
Hey.
This guy's being buried alive. He wakes up and he's like, sis.
Correct me if I'm
he
wrong,
goes,
but it's time for tea.
I was just taking a nap. Where the fuck am I? Okay, you go. Your turn.
Okay. So the one I mentioned earlier that made me realize how important the suspense aspect is a modern day one. This is a LA Times article from 1990. And a modern day magician was killed attempting a coffin escape trick on Halloween. He called himself the next Houdini. And there's actually a lot of stories of like things gone wrong with magicians trying to imitate Houdini when it comes to burying themselves. But this guy is one of the only to truly die. So He had himself buried inside a plastic and glass coffin for a Halloween night escape trick and was killed when the coffin collapsed under 9 tons of dirt and wet cement. First of all, who thought that a plastic and glass coffin would withstand 9 tons of dirt and wet cement? Someone please let me know.
Yeah.
No.
Hand
me a name. They probably worked on Titanic too. That's ridiculous. But yes, so he was 32, a recovering drug addict. Wow, extra sad, right? This dude was on his path to recovery. And he performed the stunt at a local amusement park, Blackbeard's Family Fun Center, when the coffin unexpectedly collapsed. Can we first of all just acknowledge that isn't Blackbeard like a super like terrifying pirate? And then this is like Blackbeard's Family Fun Center, which is already kind of just demented on its own. When this recovering drug addict, basically just deciding that he's a magician, volunteers to have himself buried there.
I'm officially depressed now, Sunny. Thank you. You've done it.
I'm so sorry. I don't know why this is so funny. And then it's collapsed with all these... It says, as trick-or-treaters watched in shock, rescuers frantically dug Burris out, but were unable to reach him in time. So all these poor kids who came to Blackbeard's Family Fun Center got a little bit more than they bargained for. Just so
Anything else you wanted to add to that?
No, it's just so absurd. And because it's like this sudden collapse, it almost doesn't feel like a burying alive story so much as a story of being crushed, kind of, you know? I think it's closer to what really happened. But, yeah, Joseph Burris, a second of silence for his name. Okay.
Well, that was that. All right, well... Let me fascinate you now with, thank you for that, by the way, the study of Essie Dunbar. In 1915, a 30-year-old South Carolinian named Essie Dunbar suffered a fatal attack of epilepsy, or so everyone thought. Apparently, after declaring this woman dead, doctors placed Dunbar's body in a coffin and scheduled her funeral for the next day so that her sister, who lived out of town, would still be able to pay respects. But Dunbar's sister didn't travel fast enough. She arrived only to see the last clods of dirt thrown atop the grave. This didn't sit well with Dunbar's sister, who wanted to see Essie one last time. This is the weirdest reason of all these cases that I've read for why someone would have the person dug up. But I guess it's good that they did. So they wanted to do that. And so they dug her up. They got the coffin lid open, and then Essie sat up and smiled at all those around her. She lived for another 47 years. It
opens up and you sit up and smile. You say, hey everyone, welcome to the party. What? What?
She said, is this party for me? Why, thank you.
That's just so surreal. How do you sit up and smile?
I don't know. The way this reads is just kind of hilarious. I don't know if that's actually how it happened, but I want to imagine that's how it went.
No, totally.
Like, she realized she was being buried alive, but she probably thought like, oh, my sister's gonna come and get this all fixed up. She wouldn't let this happen. So she just sits there patiently, and then she hears she's being unearthed, and she's like, okay, time to say hi to everyone. Like, this is just hilarious. But anyway.
No, exactly. And she's looking over at the bitch who, like, what was it, bit her fingernails down to the bone and ripped out her hair, like, girl, chill. Like, you can just sit up and smile, okay?
Oh my god. I have another one. So,
okay.
So this is, okay. Listen, I'll just read it. In 1867, a 24-year-old French woman named Philomèle Journel contracted cholera. Not long after, she was presumed dead.
Cholera.
As was custom at the time. Yes, I know. Fucking shout out. Hi, cholera. How's it going, sis?
We like to shout out cholera this episode.
I know. Thank you, Cholera, for
Our number
sponsoring
one
Scary
fan.
Talk. If you'd like a pack of cholera delivered to your house with free shipping, please do visit cholera.com and use code
Free
Scary Talk
shipping, but
Cholera
you
for
may have
10%
to
off.
pay for handling and fee.
Yeah. So, as was custom at the time, a priest arrived to administer the last sacraments, and then Jonet's body was placed in a coffin, but then 16 hours later, her body was lowered 6 feet underground, and what happens? A grave digger, the grave digger, hears Jonet knocking against her coffin lid and then promptly removes her from the earth. And although no breath was apparent when a lit candle was pressed under her nose, distinct rhythmical sounds could be heard in her chest. I love how, like, obviously it was her fucking heart. Like, what else? And she exhibited some muscle contraction and eyelid twitching. This didn't last long, however. Jonet was officially pronounced dead the following day and was buried a second time. And then she knocked, and then they unearthed her, and then she stood up and smiled. No. No, she did just die. Poor bitch. But listen, this sucks because, like, it's the same as that other case that I read. I think about the guy that was taken to the physician. Like,
Yeah.
my best guess is that they ran out of oxygen. Their brain assumes trauma, and they can't recover from that, and they just die the next day. So that just blows. Like, that's such a terrible way to die. Because if you're even a little bit conscious by the time you're rescued and unearthed, right, from your coffin, you're probably like even if you're a little bit conscious, like, that means you probably have a little bit hope now that you're gonna live, and then the next day you die.
You know?
Those are all the cases that I have. So whatever you have left, you go right ahead.
Okay. I think I've got one more.
All right.
And this one is sick because it was published in 2015, with its last update in 2017. So the title is "Teen Buried Alive Heard Screaming and Banging on Her Coffin. Relatives Rush to Help." And the first line, which is a real hook, by the way, a banger of a hook, whoever wrote this. "She was dead, and then she wasn't. Sadly, however, she did die shortly afterward."
Oh, no.
What? They have to say sadly, however, she did die. Okay. A 16-year-old Honduran was heard banging and screaming by her grieving husband the day after her coffin had been sealed and encased in concrete. Footage first shown by Univision's Primer Impacto shows a group of men and boys desperately breaking open the concrete and pulling out and opening the casket. The young woman, Nacy Perez, who had recently married and was 2 months pregnant, is seen lying lifeless in her wedding dress. And 2 months pregnant, too. You know, Steven Spielberg couldn't have written this.
Yeah, it's fucked.
According to a Honduran newspaper, La Prensa, she had smashed the glass viewing window on her coffin, and her fingertips and forehead were bruised. Cemetery worker said that he had heard noises coming from Perez's grave, but convinced himself that the screams were coming from somewhere else. "I never imagined that there was someone alive in there," he said. The girl's husband, the cemetery workers said that the day after the burial, the girl's husband came to him begging to get her out. "He was hysterical," the worker recalled. "The family were soon here and started breaking through the tomb, shouting her name." Clinging to hope, the relatives took the corpse back to her home, still inside her coffin, and tried to revive her. Her body was warm, according to a cousin, but she was no longer breathing. Wow.
Well, tough shit. You're dead. I mean, like, I don't know. Like, all these stories, I don't think we planned this well. I mean, like, the good ones are good, and then the bad ones are just tragic. So really,
well, I don't know,
damn.
But there's something spooky about the tragic ones too. With, like, you dig up someone and you see, like, the evidence of their struggle. You know, I think that there's something pretty
it's
spooky
definitely
about that.
spooky. I mean, being buried alive is definitely a fitting topic for a scary talk, for sure. It's just that it's kind of more like, I'm just thinking more about the commentary that I can have on the cases. It's limited because I either feel bad or I think it's kind of funny, but I don't really want to say that. So okay,
it got funnier and funnier, though, as we put them together, because it's so absurd. And it's also this whole thing of, like, you're kind of defying death in a way, right? Or, like, you know, they're dead and then they come back to life. It's like Jesus, you know? They're coming out of the tomb. It's straight up Easter. and then they usually die again. Like, that's so sad. That's so...
My forever favorite story will be the one of the woman that just like was unearthed and sat up and smiled. Now that's how I want to do it if I'm buried alive. Are you kidding me? That's the way to do it. That's classy.
Absolutely.
That's tea. I'm dabbing in my bedroom right now. That was the story. Okay, also, I was wrong. I knew I had more notes. I just couldn't find them. I found my other notes. I actually have 2 cases, and these are special because these are modern, just like the one that you read.
Ooh.
These are modern cases, and that makes them spookier or funnier, you decide. So the first case of these 2 is the case of Mina El Houari. So I'm getting this from a Listverse article. Thank you, Listverse. I'm gonna kind of just read the introduction from this article because I think it explains it perfectly. It just kind of sets it up nicely. Usually, when you're on a first date with someone, you think about how it will come to a close at the end. While you're supposed to plan for the unexpected, nobody should ever have to plan to be buried alive after dessert. I love that.
These journalists are bringing out their A game for this. They were asleep up until this moment came. Their eyes opened.
One such horrific story comes from May 2014. Okay, so back to regular Andre. So what happens is in 2014, this 25-year-old French woman, her name was Mina El Houari, had been chatting with a suitor online for months at this point before deciding to make a trip to Morocco to meet him for a real first date. Also, Loki want to travel to Morocco. That sounds fucking lit. Anyway, let's talk about the woman that almost died. She arrived at her hotel in Fez, Morocco on May 19th for her date with her dream man, but she never checked out. That's so fucked up. Whoever wrote that, that's fucked up. Because that doesn't mean she never checked out because they fell in love. She stayed in Morocco for the rest of her life and they had 4 kids. One of their names was Jimmy. No, she never left because she died. Okay, so Mina met the man and they shared a lovely evening until she collapsed onto the floor mid-date. Instead of calling the police or an ambulance, the man assumed Mina had died on the spot. What the fuck? And made the hasty decision to bury her in a shallow grave in his garden. What? Fuck?
Did this man attempt to kill her? Is that what really happened here? Because I do not understand what.
Also, I love my surprise reactions when I've already read this article, but I'm like, oh my god, what? Anyway, so the problem was that Mina wasn't actually dead. Obviously, as it happens, she was an undiagnosed diabetic and was in a diabetic coma while he buried her alive. A few days passed before Mina's family filed a missing persons report, however, and then flew to Morocco to try and find her. The Moroccan police were finally able to track down her murderer and raided his home. The police basically found muddy clothes and a used shovel, if I remember correctly, before discovering the scene in this guy's backyard. And then the man confessed to his crime and was charged with manslaughter. So
Whoa.
It's just... Let me tell you what I think. I think that this is the worst case of wrong place, wrong time, wrong person. And she's not the wrong person. He's the wrong person. This is why. She, fuck. She didn't know she was a diabetic. So she couldn't warn him of this. Mm-hmm. But honestly, even if you weren't warned of that, who the fuck?
Yeah.
Just bury someone in their backyard.
That's
you call 911.
So
but
she got...
he didn't try to he wasn't a necrophiliac. He didn't try to have sex with her corpse when he thought she was dead. He just buried her straight up.
That's good news.
And no, listen to me. That's how I'm saying it. And he also didn't chop her up or anything. So clearly the guy, it feels to me like the guy was just kind of really stupid, and he must have thought that maybe he gave her something that accidentally killed her. Imagine being in this guy's head, and one of the guy was like, "Oh my god, we did eat what if she has a selfish allergy and I just killed her? I don't want to go to jail." It seems to me like it's more that. Totally. It doesn't sound like
he sees
criminal.
That she passes out, and he's going into panic mode. He's like,
I know. He's like, I killed her. I know I killed her.
He's
Fuck.
like, dude, I knew that fart was bad, but I had no idea.
And so I think he just panicked real bad. Maybe he had some mental condition that because that's just another level of panic that quickly. Maybe he was also just not on his right mind, but whatever.
Or maybe maybe we're not accounting for his experiences. Maybe he's just used to having people die around him that he has to bury. He's got a little cemetery in his backyard for the people that have just passed out in front of his eyes.
Yeah,
You
maybe
never
a
know.
gypsy witch cursed him 10 years ago, and everyone in his family has died since. And he thought, well, this is the next one. Just time to bury her in the catacomb next to Mama. So,
Absolutely.
um,
He's the real
anyway,
victim in this story. Hmm?
no, but it's just, I don't know. I just kind of want to know what was going on in his head. But I mean, regardless, I mean, I know that people will be like, a lot of people say like, oh, it's really easy to judge people in these situations, but until you're not in this situation, you will know what to do. I
Mm.
don't think this qualifies. Like, I understand, like, I don't even gonna give an example, but like, no, I'm never gonna be so freaked out by something that like, knowing that I like didn't actually try to kill someone. If someone passes out in front of me, I'm just gonna think, oh fuck, I did it. Like, oh no, I've done it. It's an accident. I have to cover it up. Like, no, I'm gonna call 911. What the fuck? So,
And it doesn't really
anyway,
sound like he covered it up that well. If they found all that stuff, it is like if he had really hidden better, maybe he would have been chilling.
I don't think that's what it was. I mean, he could have done a good burial job, but the fact that they might have been witnesses that
That saw
know
them
that
being.
they knew that they saw them together. Yeah, the
Yeah,
police then obviously he's the lead suspect, and so they just fucking dug up his whole backyard, I guess, and found the girl.
that
Uh,
does somewhat make sense. Yeah, yeah.
I
Ah,
don't know.
yeah. Kind of
Well,
crazy that that still happens though. I mean, the spooky part is, what if it happened to you? You know.
I know. I mean, the thing is that I don't know if that one qualifies as like, oh, it could happen to you because we don't know if the guy had criminal intentions. It sounds like he didn't, right?
Mm.
But it
Mm-hmm.
sounds like maybe he just, oh no, she looks dead because she's in a diabetic coma, and so I just assumed that I accidentally killed her, and I want to cover it up, so I'm gonna bury her. But maybe he had a burial fetish, and who fucking knows? Who knows? I
Yeah,
don't
it
know.
is hard to know, but I mean, criminal or not, it could still happen to
I
us.
guess, yeah. I guess I'll never go to Morocco to have a hot date with someone, because just in case I'm an undiagnosed diabetic,
Oh
I'm
no,
fucked.
I will. I have to satisfy my burial kink.
Is that like is a burial kink
It's the
just
new
like three?
choking.
Oh my god! I was about to say that. It's no longer like choke me, daddy. It's just bury me, father.
It's like
Okay,
step on my throat,
so
literally kill me, throw me into a grave, and then let me be suffocated alive.
that's really gonna get me off. Okay, so oh my god, I have another one. This one's with a kid, so saving the worst for last.
Ooh.
Again, these fucking like intros from the list verse authors, I love them and I hate them. So the idea of being buried alive is scary enough, but it becomes inconceivably horrific when a child is the victim of such a catastrophe. In August 2014, that is exactly what happened to a 6-year-old girl in Uttar Pradesh, India. I don't. And listen, according to the girl's uncle, Alok Awatashi, a married couple that lived close to the victim, told the girl that her mother wanted them to accompany her to a fair a few villages over. You're following so far?
Yes.
Okay. It wasn't until they reached an expansive sugar cane field that they then proceeded to strangle the girl and bury her for an unknown reason. Luckily, however, some of the villagers apparently working in a field around there saw them enter and then became suspicious when they exited without the kid. They went to the spot and then found her unconscious in this kind of like shallow grave just inside the field. And then these villagers were able to rush her to a hospital in the nick of time. And then when the girl regained consciousness, she was able to identify her kidnappers. The girl,
Wow.
however, did not remember being buried alive. I honestly theorize it's because she blocked that memory immediately because it was so traumatic that her brain was like immediately repressed that.
I mean, very
Um,
possible, but also they could have, I mean, strangled her to the point where she was just unconscious for that whole period, you know?
That's also true. Police do not know why the neighbors plan to kill the girl, and the hunt apparently is still on for the suspects. I mean,
Whoa.
however, I'm glad that the girl
So it
didn't die.
really
That
could happen
yeah,
to you. The suspects are out there.
yeah, it really could. I mean, that's just fucking bizarre, right? Like, again, I say this not be. I know it sounds weird when I say this, but like, they didn't do other shit to the girl. So that just makes me like, what the fuck is the? Where do you get off? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
that's what I'm trying to say. So that is just bizarre because as horrific as I'll just say it, fucking rapist murderers are.
Yeah.
Well, you understand from a logical standpoint like what's happening. They
Mhm.
want to perpetrate the suffering and they get off of it.
Mhm.
That's that. But like just bury someone just cuz, and they didn't abuse the girl. They didn't even kill her. They just buried her. Um
Yeah.
that's bizarre. So
I mean, maybe it was the strangling and the burial, the kind of like we're killing this little, or maybe it was their first time and they could sense that there were people around, so they were just getting it done with. But that's very
I
true that it's
guess.
like disturbing how sort of brief it is, the whole interaction. Um,
I know. I know. It's just I mean it's like you can go from like just living your day. And I mean, listen. Okay, first off, okay, if I'm reading this correctly, the article says that the girl was just hanging, and that um, okay, near couple lived close to the victim told the girl that her mother wanted to. Yeah, okay, so I guess the girl was just hanging out like outside of her house. And then these two people approach her, and stranger danger. Maybe the girl didn't know that, and so she went with them. And from her life went from 0 to 60 in like 2 minutes. But like, where were the parents? Hello, where were the parents? God.
I mean, sometimes children need outside time. I also might have another one that goes along with my sort of cool Wikipedia history women being murdered theme. Um,
Lit. Okay, give that to me.
Great. Okay. This is my like feminist take on being buried alive. I'm gonna
All
go ahead
right.
and coin right now. Femmes still alive. Trademark by Sunny Snow. For when I write a book and or a peer-reviewed article. So within the Holy Roman Empire, a variety of offenses, which is cool. Holy Roman Empire, kind of the basis for our current Western culture, right? Which is going to be relevant because
Mm-hmm.
you'll see how it's really interesting. So the cool thing about the law is that it's just morals written out like in hard print, right? So when you look at the
Mm-hmm.
law of any given empire, you see what the morals were. So within the Holy Roman Empire, a variety of offenses, including rape, infanticide, and theft, could be punished with live burial. For example, the Schwabenspiegel, a law code from the 13th century, specified that the rape of a virgin should be punished by live burial, whereas the rapist of a non-virgin was to be beheaded. Again, so people get that live burial is fucked up. So also this idea of purity too. So if you rape a
I know.
non-virgin, you just get the Marie Antoinette chop. But if you rape a virgin, no, dude, you've gotta
Suffer.
get straight up
Yeah.
buried alive. Yeah. So it's crazy how much purity played into it already. And then, check this out: female murderers of their own employers also risked being buried alive. So they said, if you rape a pure woman, or if a woman dares to murder the man that that employs her, buried alive.
Wow.
um, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then in Augsburg in 1505, for example, a 12-year-old boy and a 13-year-old girl were found guilty of killing their master in conspiracy with the cook. The boy was beheaded, and the girl and the cook were buried alive beneath the gallows. So,
Wow. I think we sometimes forget just how shit like times of old were even to children.
yeah.
Um,
And,
which like, and listen,
yeah.
murder is bad. Nobody who does it, no matter who does it to who, like that was murder from what it wasn't manslaughter. It was just it was premeditated. But I mean, they were children, and who knows what the master was doing, and maybe they should have just gotten life and did
That's
prison
so
exist? Like I
true.
don't know.
Eat the rich, man.
Yeah, it's complicated because they are children, but it's also still murder. But I mean, listen, beheading, being buried alive. I mean, it's it's weird, right? Because like one could argue like, oh, it's almost better to just die if the alternative is that they're gonna imprison you. But back then, prisons were like dirty dungeons, and like I don't know, like
Hmm.
and like if they were gonna imprison you for the rest of your life, like is it really a life worth living? I don't know. That gets a
That's
little
a
too
good
philosophical,
question.
but like yeah.
No, and the kind of last one here. One jurist observed that in the Middle Ages, live burial of women guilty of infanticide was a very frequent punishment in city statutes. Um, yeah, he noted a few different places where this was true. The Berlinische Statbook records that between 1412 and 1447, so that's a period of what, 35 years? 10 women were buried alive there. And as late as 1583, live burial was still used as an alternate execution method for punishing mothers found guilty of infanticide. So that's
I mean, by infanticide,
one.
do you mean like I killed my 5-year-old because he didn't eat his broccoli, or do they mean like we're not stands of Roe v. Wade?
I think it's like probably born already.
No,
okay, but infanticide makes you think younger than 5, probably like 1, 2, 3. Yeah, but it probably includes all children. But that is a really interesting one. And in general, I think the idea of infanticide is really interesting. Yeah, that was what I was going to say.
In general, I just think infanticide is fascinating.
Well, you know what hit me is I watched a movie way back when, and it was a very Christian movie, so now I kind of doubt a lot of what it said. But it was called The Dropbox, and it was about in South Korea, like when mothers would have children who were deformed or like disabled. Sometimes
Sonny said, "God is dead."
I did just say that.
What are you saying?
But like South Korean mothers, sometimes like poor South Korean mothers, and also like back in the day, South Korea was a developing country where people were really struggling. But I say this as a half Korean, please don't hate me. But mothers would sometimes, if their children were like deformed or disabled, like their baby would like leave it on the street or something, and a lot of the times it would die. So that's the theory that this Christian couple was going off of. So they created a Dropbox where people could just drop any baby in and they would take care of it. Literally a baby Dropbox. But anyways, yeah.
Did Dropbox like incorporated, like the company that makes the files, like did they catch wind of this? Because they should shut that down, or honestly buy it off, because if it's working, could be a good addition to the properties.
Oh man, yeah, it is called Dropbox. Yeah, they should sue them for sure. Someone should sue someone. But you know what? There's a space between drop and box for the movie name.
Oh, so, never mind.
Yeah, no, so it's over. So.
Okay, I mean, kind of unrelated, but also not. Like, people do that, like people did that with babies in South Korea back when, okay? But people still do that with, like, little animals nowadays. Like, I had a cat when I was, I don't know, like 8. And it's because we found this cat inside a cardboard box that someone had put in the middle of the street because they were hoping that the cat would get ran over.
Oh my God.
And I guess my mom saw that box before it got ran over, and so we adopted that cat. That's just crazy, dude. Like,
yeah. And also, like, intellectually, a cat is equal to, if not better than, a 1-year-old human. Like, really. I'm just saying, like, 1-year-old humans do not have that much to offer, which is another kind of interesting thing with the idea of infanticide, is that you're calling it a murder of a human because you're admitting to, like, the potential of a 1-year-old. But a 1-year-old intellectually really is like a cat, right? Or like a dog, like a...
What Sunny's saying is that killing 1-year-olds, it's more akin to felinicide than infanticide.
No, I mean, I definitely think that it's worthy of murder as a crime. But yeah, just crazy how we treat animals, all that considered. Yeah. I just thought at the time, like, there's gotta be a better way to get rid of this animal if you don't like it. Like, just pull an artificial intelligence on the cat and just drop it off in the woods, and at least at that point it has some chance of surviving. Like, yeah, or drop it off at the pound, okay? Like, or
yeah, like, what the fuck? But anyway, well, on that cheery note, this was Scary Talk episode 60 or whatever. I'll decide that later. And
I'm sorry I got so off topic.
And thank you everyone for listening. We really appreciate you listening. And remember that you can find this podcast on all podcast listening platforms. That is Stitcher, TuneIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, etc. Everywhere. Also, please let us know if you have topic suggestions for future episodes, as we do take those into consideration. And Sunny, anything else to add?
No, thank you so much for having me. This was super fun. Hope you had a great time. I'm at Sunny Snell on Instagram. I'm single. Slide in the DMs, especially if you're attractive of either gender. I swing anyway. That's it. That's my spiel.
Slide in, she'll slide right back. Thank you everyone for listening. We love you. Good night.
Good
Bye.
night.